Hiring managers of Reddit, what was your most WTF is wrong with this person moment you've had during an interview? When she listed all of her ex-boyfriends that currently worked there and said she couldn't wait to see the look on their faces when she showed up to work. This was in the first 3 minutes of the interview, so I wasn't even close to offering the job yet. I cut the interview right there and sent her on her way. I interviewed a gal once, and while we were talking, I was looking over her resume. Please note that English is her first language, or else this wouldn't have humored me so much. Her mission statement on her resume was as follows: along with my detail-oriented and organizational skills, I will encourage team to work cooperatively and creativity to provide an understanding the visual aspects of our work. This was for an admin position at a law firm. Not sure what the visual aspects of our work entailed in this position. Honestly, I read it over about 5 or 6 times. Worried that I was having a stroke, so I didn't really hear much of anything she said during the interview. I haven't been able to make sense of it no matter how many times I read it. I actually cut it out of her resume and have it sitting on my desk some 15 years later. Hiring for a senior dev position. Had a telephone interview and she seemed confident and competent, so I flew her down for an on-site interview. She calls not me but the front desk reception and says she can't drive in a big city and needs a car to pick her up, and she refuses to get the rental car we reserved before Uber Lyft. Call is transferred to me and I tell her to take the train. Atlanta. Marta. No, he says. Too scary. I tell her to go to the taxi stand and take that. Nope, afraid of taxes. She wants a court limo to pick her up and nothing else will do. She is adamant. I put her on hold. Have a chat with my boss who said just send her home. She's too much work if she can't even handle this. I tell her thank you for taking the time to fly down, but not even our own VPs get the treatment, and to go ahead and change your ticket to fly home now. She then starts telling me she will take a taxi, etc. I said please don't bother, it will be a waste of everyone's time. Thank you. Goodbye. Not once when setting up her travel plans did she say she needed assistance getting from the airport. It was explained to her she would pick up a rental car at the airport. She was fine with it. No idea WTF she was thinking, but ain't nobody got time for that nonsense. I was performing a video interview with a candidate. They were clearly in a large bedroom, with most of it visible in the background. But it was clean, so I didn't mind. In the back right corner was a closed door. About 7 minutes into the interview I see the door open slightly and some dude poke his head in. See that his roommate girlfriend was in an interview, then close the door. Not a big deal. It happens. I ask my next question and let the candidate respond. But then, about 30 seconds later I see the door slowly open again. Only this time the dude comes crawling out the bottom. He continues to crawl across the floor, making his way to the opposite side of the room. I assume he thought he was out of the camera's FOV, but he was clearly visible. He gets to the far end of the room and turns to fiddle with something else in the air facing the camera. Finally, he finishes up with whatever he was doing and makes his way back and out the door. I know I should have stopped the candidate and had her deal with the dude, but it was so funny to watch I had to let it play out. I could barely contain my laughter, and after the interview finished I lost it. She got the job though, and from what I remember was a great employee. TL. Doctor, she was a lazy liar. Hiring a business intelligence analyst. There are a variety of ways to get into this profession. I'm open to many of them. Frankly, if you have a good head on your shoulders and know even basic SQL, I can probably work with you, though lately I've had to get more picky as our projects have become more complex. This woman is mid-40s. Boisterous personality and seems like she'd be a good organizational fit. The problem is she keeps lying, but only halfway. Do you know SQL? Oh yes. I have years of experience with it. Great. So take a look at this code. This is the sort of thing we do. What's this? Comma. For some reason, though, the most egregious lie that stands out in my head with her was when she commented, when I suggested she not take a particular route to the train station because it was dark and potentially unsafe. Also, I was headed to the same station and did not wish to commute with her, that she had a black belt and had practiced martial arts for years. Oh, cool. What discipline? I don't remember. FFS. Me. I see you manage a vegetarian restaurant. Interviewee. What? It says here you manage a vegetarian restaurant. I guess I did write that. Not really though. My girlfriend had an art exhibition, and I organized the sandwiches for the opening. They were vegetarian. This was a candidate that was otherwise pretty impressive seeming, and had been among the favorites for a quite sought after position. The interview had even gone quite well up until this point. Met him later at a party. He had no memory of me. I set up an interview for an acquaintance's nephew with a company looking to hire 30 college students for summer work. The nephew's major and the line of work this company performed seemed to mesh perfectly, and I knew the hiring manager personally, so it seemed like a great fit. A couple weeks later the acquaintance emails asking about the job, so I hit up my hiring manager friend and the conversation went something like this. Me: hey, how'd the round of hiring go? HR: great. Needed to fill 30 spaces and only had to do 31 interviews to fill them. Me: oh cool. So was Paul X one of them? HR: oh him. Yeah well. UHH. He was naked during the interview so we declined. Me: what? Are you serious? I find it hard to believe he would show up to an interview nude. HR: well, it was a Skype interview, and when we brought up his video feed he was laying in bed nude. Me: oh. Well, maybe he thought you couldn't see him. Maybe he thought it was just an audio meeting. HR: we told him we could see him and he said sorry, then covered up with a sheet. We asked if he wanted to reschedule and he said no, he was good. So yeah, we decided to pass. Sorry Paul. I hire student, university, workers. One of my questions is tell me about a time at work where you made a mistake and how you fixed it. This kid had no prior work experience, so I modified the question to remove the at work part. I thought he'd tell me about ducking up at school or at home, and no. He told me about the time where he ripped his pants in gym class in the 4th grade. He didn't tell me how he fixed the situation either, so I'm assuming his pants are ripped to this day. This kid was a goldmine of what not to do in an interview. TBH, he did not get the job. We have a very simple pre-employment test. If you have been in our industry for more than a year you should get 100%. Sometimes we even give it as an at-home test. We had one guy that took his test home, had it for over a week. He brought it to the formal interview and got 90% of the questions wrong, even though according to his resume he was an all-star and knew everything. He had an excuse for every wrong answer to even the most widely known questions in our industry. It would be the equivalent of saying you have been laying sod for 20 years, and then put the green side down. He didn't get the job. I did a phone interview with a guy and he seemed really excited and very friendly. He seemed to be relatively new to the field, but we were willing to give him a chance. I invited him to come in for an in-person interview. My manager and I were doing the second interview, and when I called him in, he gave me a huge hug and proceeded to talk to me like I was his best friend. As a 27-year-old woman, I was incredibly uncomfortable and froze up. At the end of the interview, we told him we would reach out to him within the next couple of weeks to let him know the outcome. After the interview, my manager asked if I knew him, and I said I definitely did not. His interview was not great either, and he was not a good fit for the job. My manager was the one who had to call him to let him know he didn't get the job. However, he proceeded to call my phone every day that week and left me long voicemails. Most of the times he'd ask about his interview, but sometimes he'd say things like, "Hey girl, how are things going?" I was thinking, if I get hired we should hang out. It freaked me out, and I had my manager call him early to give him the news that he did not get the job. The calls did not stop, and I just kept deleting his voicemails without listening. My manager and I were so disturbed by his persistence that we went to HR for help, and they must have done something because the calls stopped after that. To start the interview, I asked him to tell us, 3 people, a little bit about himself. 35 minutes later, he stopped talking. Usually people answer this question in 5 minutes. It was incredibly awkward and I was tempted to interrupt him, but then truly wanted to see how long he would go. The strangest ever was a man telling us all about his mom's Alzheimer's, talking crap about our company, and getting upset we didn't offer him the position on the spot. It was a wild ride beginning to end. Obligatory not a hiring manager, but I still had to interview some candidates. Some of the walls in the office were painted a vague brownish color, Partway during the interview, this guy starts looking around with a really spaced out look and says, "This office really reminds me of a cardboard box. But not in a bad way. Like the kind of box that you put things in. You know?" He then decided that he didn't want the job and left before the interview was over. Had a candidate who came in and said how hot my admin was and asked if she was single or open to Freaky Fridays. Not a manager, but I was the interviewee. I wasn't feeling well that morning, but I had an interview with a super cool science museum as a promotions event coordinator. It would have been the perfect job. I decided to go anyways. As I drove to the interview, I felt horrible. When I went inside, I was feeling worse. I was asked to sit and wait for the hiring manager to come get me. When she finally did, I knew I had made a mistake in coming. I got up and followed her across the whole museum and up 2 flights of stairs. It felt like it was 120 degrees in there. And finally, as we were walking toward her office and she reached for the door handle, my stomach let go. I barely made it to the trash can right next to me and proceeded to vomit for a good 2 minutes, even dry heaving a few times. When I was finished, I looked up and she had her back to me with her head in her hands like she was trying to hold it together. I said I was sorry and I hope she had a better day than me, and I turned around and left. Man, that would have been a fun job. Worked at a pizza place. Older looking Karen comes in and asks to speak to the manager. GM was there that day, so I just go get him. Assuming she's asking about a job. "Are you all still hiring?" "Yes, ma'am." "And how long do you normally take to look through applications?" "About a week or 2. Q Karen voice. "Well, that's interesting because I applied here a month ago and haven't heard back." At this point, GM is shocked with the sudden shift in this lady's tone. "Oh, well, we did just clean out the office, so your application may have gotten lost. If you'd like, you can fill out another one." And no, I want you to find my application. At this point, I can see my GM start to do the math here. She's yelling at him like an angry customer. But she's an applicant, so I could tell he wasn't really sure whether to put on the customer service face or the angry boss face. Then the light bulb comes on. "And what's your availability, mom?" "Mornings." "Yeah, that's too bad. We're actually all booked on mornings." "We weren't. So you might want to try the Domino's across the street." By Reddit. Typo. We had a shortlisted candidate come for a campus interview. This usually includes meeting with the dean, a long interview with the full hiring committee, a formal meeting with the department chair, dinner with the hiring committee, a formal job talk, 1-hour academic lecture, teaching a sample undergrad course, and meeting some students, as well as a campus tour. During the job talk, he kept flashing the pink satin liner of his suit jacket in the direction of one of our openly gay grad students. Everyone noticed. Later, he proceeded to get trashed during the meet greet with the students at a local bar and confided all of the dirt about his current department and overshared the status of his rocky relationship with a grad student back at his home university. A big no-no. Even though it happens sometimes. The next morning sealed the big fat no. Grad student usually volunteers and is compensated to drive the candidate back to the airport. This person kept trying to persuade the openly gay grad student to drive him instead, even though another student, female, already had the task assigned to her. He didn't get an offer. Asked a male applicant about a few specific projects he'd done with people I've met. His comments about male collaborators were perfectly normal and respectful. His comments about female collaborators were dismissive, condescending, and inappropriately familiar. I know there are lots of sexist people out there, but not being able to conceal it for a 30-minute interview? A few years ago, I was hiring for a new graphic designer. The guy didn't have much working experience and was a little odd, but I liked his portfolio, so I decided to interview him anyways. The whole interview was bizarre, but ended with the question, "What do you think are your weaknesses?" He replied, "TBH, I have some pretty violent tendencies." I've had 2 separate cases where people were so confident that they had a job that they botched the interview. On one of these, I wanted to tell the candidate to go out and come back in again, because he was one of 2 very good choices and his arrogance put my team off. They thought the other candidate would be a better fit. This kid, probably 18-20, started picking his nose, like knuckle deep and digging for gold in the middle of his food service job interview. wrapped that up real quick and didn't hire him. Not a hiring manager exactly, but have been with the company long enough that they let me run the occasional interview for the delivery drivers that work under me. There was a guy who came in and already seemed off when asking for an application. They handed him one because why not, and he came back the next day and handed it back filled out minimally. Then kept asking, so when is my interview? They just told them they would call him when they figured it out, but after ghosting him for a couple days he began calling up every day asking when he could come in for an interview. They said I should just sit down with him and tell him we aren't hiring and we will let him know if anything changes. So I sat down in a booth and waited for this guy to come in. Then I see through the window him getting out of his car in our work uniform. See, we give you all that stuff your first day and he hasn't even had an interview. He comes in and sits down opposite me and we exchange pleasantries and he asks me if I like his uniform. I say yeah, but question who gave it to him, and he tells me he made it. I ask him why he made a uniform if we give him a few, and he told me it was because we hadn't given him one. He also started being very rude after this question, so I guess I hurt his feelings. I told him what I was supposed to tell him, but he also didn't have a functioning car but 2 days a week and somehow wanted full-time hours, so I denied him for that reason, but yeah, definitely strange at the least. This was about 3 weeks ago. We had a woman who works at the generic retail big box store across town wanting to transfer to our store of the same name because it's closer to her house. She showed up for the interview wearing a faded shirt from a local redneck bar, complete with rebel flag, cut-off jeans, and flip-flops. During the interview she proceeded to talk it about 6 different managers associates by name from her current store. She cussed during the interview and kept telling us more and more about the people she didn't like. Do people not realize that if we hear them talking it about them, that we know she'll do it to us too, and at least dress for an interview? I have 2 stories. The first is back in college days. We were interviewing for a new college newspaper reporter. The question was, this position requires an energetic, inquisitive and outgoing person who can chase a story and get the facts. With that in mind, how would you describe yourself? The answer was up. Fun? Os, care to elaborate on that? No, they did not get the position. The second one was for an IT position in my later career. An individual that had been fired from one branch of a government agency decided to apply for another branch a few years later. But his resume read very much differently than the reality. Instead of him being fired for essentially not knowing how to do his primary job function, he was now let go when the project closed 3 years after he was fired. Also, all his resume achievements listed for that time were things either myself or one of my co-workers had accomplished. Things that he didn't even have any involvement with. I guess he didn't realize we were on the hiring panel because we had merged with another region. I honestly don't fathom how he thought that was going to work out because it was the same agency and it's not like we wouldn't have noticed.